I'm super excited to talk to you all. I have heard a lot about Spearbit, a lot of good things. Just hanging out on Twitter, I've gotten to chat with a few of you before. So super excited to be here and talk about ZK. I actually don't have too much planned. I'm mostly just answering questions, and I'll try and speed through some of the things from the class because if any of you have watched the class, it was a bit of a mess. I'll tell the full story in a second. So yeah, why am I talking to you? First of all, background: I work as a blockchain security researcher at Godolsky Security. Um, it's a lot of fun. I've liked to have worked here about a year now. I've been learning cryptography since 2013. The backstory for that is that when I was very little, I thought the coolest job in the world was being a spy. And then at some point, I realized I didn't have the social skills for that. So I was like, because I don't know, it freaks me out. Like, so the next best thing is codes and code breaking. So cryptography kind of led to that. I've always liked math a lot. That's really my strongest background is math. I come at this very much from the technical side of things. If you ask me business questions, I'll give my random opinion, but much more stronger on the technical side. And then yeah, I taught the ZK class in like October, November-ish this past fall. That was not intentional. I just had a few friends asking me to teach them about zero knowledge, and so I was like, all right, I've got like 5 friends asking. I'm pretty sure like a couple people on Twitter might be interested too. And so I just posted that I would do this, I would have this class, and anyone who wants to join could join. I ended up timing it with right after there's a big Ethereum conference in Bogota, and Vitalik had just talked about the importance of like zero knowledge. So I think everyone came back from that conference and was just like, oh my gosh, like here's the class, we're all gonna take it. So as you saw, I was a little unorganized, didn't plan for that many people, but it was fun. I think hopefully today will be a little more coherent, a little better production quality, a little more. Hopefully, I can explain things better now. So, what is zero knowledge proofs? The key word here is actually the proofs. I know we're gonna get to some advanced stuff because I know there are a lot of smart people in this room, but we just gotta start make sure everyone's on the same page. Keyword's definitely proofs. The zero knowledge doesn't even appear in everything. Like a lot of ZK rollups are not using the privacy component of this. They're just using the proofs, which gives nice scalability. So when you think of ZK, zero knowledge is a fun buzzword though. I like it. I'm good with keeping ZK as the buzzword. But if you are ever confused or you're just trying to understand, like, should I use ZK in something? How does ZK work? Like, what's the point of this? Just think of verifiable computation. There's some computation being done, and you want to prove that the computation is being done correctly. So anyone, for example, could verify that what's happening on a ZK rollup is being done correctly. So just a quick couple examples. There's ZK rollups. You want to verify from Ethereum's perspective. Ethereum wants to verify everything that's happening in this other place. From Tornado Cash perspective, you don't really want to know like whose money this is or where it's coming from, but you want to verify that someone withdrawing the money, it actually is withdrawing money that belongs to them. Like, you don't want just anyone to be able to withdraw. And so you can't know but like what this computation is, but you need to be able to verify that it's happening correctly. And Dark Forest is the first sort of game on Ethereum that uses ZK, and any sort of blockchain gaming where you want to use sort of hidden components. Like all the data on a blockchain is normally very public, but lots of games use like fog of war type of stuff where parts of the game aren't known until like you discover it or later. And so again, you shouldn't be able to like just look at the blockchain and see what it is, but you want to verify that like the game's working correctly. And so again, Dark Forest is a nice example. So all of that, if you're wondering like, ZK, think verifiable computation. All right, I'm just gonna walk through some buzzwords because this, I think, is one of the sort of intimidating parts of seeing ZK for the first time, is there are just a bunch of buzzwords, and they're a little bit, they might be new, but they're actually not complicated, really, at least in my opinion. So I'll just walk through some buzzwords and explain all of those. Also, some of these, like, you can look it up, but sometimes just hearing someone say it out loud helps clarify stuff. So when creating zero knowledge proofs, there is typically a setup phase, and sometimes that happens once for the entire blockchain. Sometimes the setup needs to happen every single proof. That's not as good. And there are a few ZK protocols that don't require really much of a public setup. But regardless, from the setup is typically generated what is called the prover key and the verifier key. In this diagram, that's PK and VK. I don't like the term key here because key typically means secret. Like, a lot of people compare it to like public key, private key stuff. That both the prover key and the verifier key are public. The setup is public. The setup is all about sort of establishing trust, and here are the ground rules that we're about to follow for the rest of the protocol. From then on, everything else is about the prover and the verifier. I'm sure you guys can figure out which is which. The inputs to the prover are typically like the sort of computation you want to prove, and then a witness for that computation. So the witness W is another word that people get confused by. An example, if you're familiar with modular arithmetic, finding if something's like if a certain number is a square of another number is a little difficult. And so the computation would be squaring modulo something, and the witness to whether some number is a square would be one of the square roots. So you would, if you pass in a actual square root and the computation square, the prover is going to take that and generate pi, the proof, and then send that over to the verifier. And the verifier should be able to verify the proof with the verifier key and be able to tell whether that's correct or not. Hopefully that was some of the buzzwords. More buzzwords is the step-by-step process of how you get from the code to sort of the proof. I think this can be another intimidating thing if you are just trying to get into this space. So starting on the left, you just have the program logic. So regular logic. Let's use ZK rollups for this example. So the logic is still just the normal stuff. If you want to do a transaction on a layer 2, great. The computation itself is more like, all right, from that logic, you're gonna actually have to sign a transaction and saying that I'm paying this much to someone else. The circuit definition, and this is kind of where you start hearing about everything in ZK's polynomials. What we want to do, or the reason ZK works, is because polynomials have some very cool scaling error correction properties. So the goal right now is to get from our regular code down to a polynomial, and then we'll kind of prove things about the polynomial. That's how pretty much every ZK protocol works in some way. So to get down to the polynomial, typically you have a circuit definition, and this is in the sense of arithmetic circuit. So think like logic gates. So if you want to add A and B, you have a circuit diagram that outputs, A plus B. And typically in a lot of ZK proofs, the only operations you're really allowed to do are add and multiply. So if you try and do fancy things like hash algorithms, those are a lot harder to do in ZK, but still important to implement. So when I talk about challenges later, the conversion of more complicated operations into a zero knowledge proof is complicated. Arithmetization, that's kind of taking your circuit and actually, so the circuit still kind of looks like I should have pulled up an example, but we're still at the sort of like tree phase, and arithmetization is actually turning that tree into like one polynomial. Non-interactive proof is most of these protocols, as they're originally written, involve some going back and forth between the prover and verifier. That's very inconvenient, and there's actually just very nice ways to turn interactive protocols into a non-interactive one. That's a detail we can go to later. And then the integration. So non-interactive proof is typically the last step of a ZK, but the integration step is like once you've done the whole ZK proof, how do you integrate that back into whatever you're trying to do? So now that I've generated a whole like ZK proof and done this whole nonsense, like what happens next? For security researchers, that's still a very important part, because even if you do all the ZK correctly, if it doesn't like integrate back into your app, it can be a mess. Cool. Couple more buzzwords. I think seeing this diagram, it's one of my favorites. I'm a big fan of the Scroll researchers and the Scroll blog. I'll link that later. So this is on a layer 2. You see the sequencer. That's what on a layer 1 would be like the miners or the stakers, whoever's running the nodes. The sequencer is kind of like where the transactions are sent. And then those from the transactions, we're going to need to generate some proofs. And so they're sent to, first the data sent to coordinators, and coordinators kind of like help organize who's doing which proof at what time. Because as you can see, these proofs will take a while, longer than the time period of a block, potentially. And so you kind of have to coordinate several of them. But then they're nice scaling properties where you can do a proof of the proofs that have been made so far. And then you only have to verify like one thing back on this top level is back on Ethereum itself. And so you'd want to post some of the data from the transactions so that Ethereum can verify, okay, this data and this proof, all of that is correct. Cool. All right, Q&A. There were a bunch of good questions already, and I expect to have some more probably. So from a high level perspective, how do you go from verifiable computation to a polynomial? It seems to be all about polynomials. All right, I'm going to cop out of this answer a little bit by just telling you to read Vitalik's blog on, the whole blog is on quadratic arithmetic programs from 0 to hero, but really the part from computation to R1CS, rank 1 constraint system, I think that's sort of the part that's nice to watch and see. It walks through sort of line by line, and you'll understand it better if you just read Vitalik's article than if you hear me sort of listen to it. But yeah, in general, yeah, going from the computation to the polynomial, you could think about, like, you could translate in multiple ways. R1CS is sort of the default because it's very straightforward. It's very like simple for what it is. If you hear about stuff like Plonk, Plonk is kind of an improvement to R1CS. And so in practice, there might be something else, but a lot of them, like you can start by understanding R1CS and then understand the improvements. Easy way to go. Also, sorry, it's quite noisy at my office today. Hopefully it's not too much background noise. So do we need to understand the math, or is there a way to hack stuff together? Any good first project you recommend? I don't think you need to be like the biggest, math cryptography person in the world to understand most of this math. First of all, even if you do want to learn every single math detail about ZK, which I think is pretty achievable in like probably 1 or 2 months of like dedicated study, if you really went for it. It's all polynomials, so it's pretty much all stuff that you'll be familiar with. I mean, there's some finite fields. Also, if it's too noisy, please stop me. I will go find another room. It would take a second, but so anyway, I don't think you need to understand the math. If you want to, you can, and it won't take too long either. Good first project you recommend. If you want to sort of test sort of where you're at on the math or any of this, or just in general, I recommend everybody go read the Tornado Cash white paper if you want to try. It's only 3 pages long, and I think everyone knows how famous and big Tornado Cache is. So for 3 pages, it's a great sort of self-test of, hey, am I sort of understanding these concepts? Do I know why these things are happening? Or if it's too complicated, like you might want to go look up stuff. This is one of the lectures in my class, is like an hour-long explanation of these 3 pages if you want to really hear all the details, or if you get stuck. So more ZK exercises. Read the Tornado Cache white paper. Highly recommend. ZK Battleship is like a great sort of intro to ZK example. If you just want to play around and click around, go play ZK Battleship. It's already built for you. You don't have to do anything. If you want, you can like look into the code and see how it's done and make some changes or play with it. But if you want a full working example already, try ZK Battleship. Otherwise, like, go try building stuff. I linked to Mina and Leo examples. There are plenty of sort of starter examples. A very common one is Battleship. Stuff like tic-tac-toe is also common. ZK tic-tac-toe is like a nice project to implement if you just want one idea. All right, several questions. What applied math fundamentals should someone have under their belt while diving into ZK? I'm going to go with these one at a time. So if you really want to learn the ZK math, it helps to have roughly background, 1 college class of number theory, 1 college class of abstract algebra. You don't have to go super deep into these things. Like number theory and like you can go down a whole rabbit hole of elliptic curves, and I did. It was fun. But like you could do all of ZK pretty much without understanding the elliptic curves. And then if you happen to be super interested about that, let me know and I'll send more resources specific. But you can get through like, I'd say 90, 95%, 98% of this with 1 college class number theory, 1 college class abstract algebra, and then take the ZK MOOC. The list of professors here are all stars. Dan Benet in particular, I'm a huge fan of. Stanford, pretty much anything Dan Benet touches is amazing. Shafi Goldwasser from UC Berkeley, she invented zero-knowledge proofs, so great person to learn from. She's at UC Berkeley. She's also on the board of Algorand, involved in a couple other ZK projects around the space. Don Song from UC Berkeley. Justin Thaler, Georgetown University. Justin Thaler has a book on verifiable proofs, and Justin Thaler's book on verifiable proofs is pretty much the only book on the subject so far. So if you are a book reader and want to get into the technical details, like, it's a textbook, to be clear. It's not too long. I want to say it's like 100 pages. Maybe I don't remember. But anyway, I like Justin Thaler's book. And then Yuping Zhang is all 5 of these people are amazing. I got to meet them at a talk at Berkeley last fall. That was awesome. What lessons were learned from organizing and teaching the ZK classes? Will you do something like this again soon? Biggest one is that making good ZK content takes a lot of work. In particular, I don't think there are any ZK classes that are both quick and well explained. The good explanations tend to be many hours long. For instance, I'll link Zero Knowledge FM, the Zero Knowledge podcast, and Anna Rose do a lot of great work, but their intro to ZK is like 12 hours, and my class is like 6 hours. And so I still think people like that's a lot to go tell someone to learn. Ideally, people could get ramped up in 1 to 2 hours. I think there's still a lot of room for improvement for like ZK content. Other lessons learned, it's a lot of fun. I met like people from every single project. If you were in the class, you know, like I messaged pretty much everyone individually, which was like over 1,000 people. And so it took a long time to message every single person, but it was really great to connect and just meet all the exciting stuff in the space. It did make me super optimistic about this for the future and feel like we're all learning about it at like a really good time. Like there are even applications of ZK outside of blockchain And I think Vitalik's right when Vitalik predicted that ZK could be like as big as blockchain at some point in the future. Oh, will I do something like this again soon? I want to make more like high quality content. I don't think doing it last minute on like a quick time frame is the way that I like working. I did my best for the class to put something together that was fun, and I think a lot of people enjoyed it. I took a break afterwards because it was a lot to do in addition to a full-time job. And um, I think now I still want to make some content, but it'll come out slower and it'll be sort of more polished and nicer, is the goal. Also, sorry, I should have the Q&A pulled up over here in case anyone... Okay, no one's messaged anything yet. Nice. All right, so next, can you discuss any current challenges or limitations of the ZK EVM? So in general, the general purpose circuits are less efficient. That is kind of the main critique. I don't think that's actually going to end up being that important. I don't, because so the idea is like if I write a layer 2, people using their code in the layer 2, like everyone sort of has to shove whatever like smart contracts they're writing through the same zero knowledge circuits. You can't optimize the layer 2 circuit for the smart contract. I don't think there would be that much optimization. Most smart contracts are very straightforward anyways. If you're trying to do something crazy, maybe it matters. It's kind of a limitation people talk about, but I actually don't think it's that bad. What is a more danger is that we're already maxing out AWS instances to generate the proofs. So if I quickly scroll back to on scroll, these proof generation and the rollers, those are being run on like the largest instances that AWS has, and the proofs are still taking like an hour to generate the mega proofs. So like hopefully we find ways to generate the mega proofs a little faster or more efficiently, because we're maxing out AWS already. Like we don't have like computers big enough for some of this. And then fragmentation, that's going to probably be, I think the first two can be solved more technically. And then fragmentation, there are all these different like roll-ups, different ZK VMs. Moving things between them is a pain right now. There will be ZK bridges. Bridges so far have been a security nightmare, as you guys know. And just the general like sort of fragmentation of the network, I think, is not great for something, for like user experience and some other things. So I think that will be the bigger long-term challenge of ZK VMs is like interoperability, fragmentation. A race between scaling solutions is heating up and will be a must-watch in 2023. What are your predictions? So on the innovation, I think I just kind of said some of those, but a few more. I think ZK programming is going to take off a lot this year. I think there will be a lot more developers trying to test out different ZK apps and stuff. Like the Tornado Cache white paper is very short. Tornado Cache code is also pretty short. It won't be too long before there are a bunch of developers who could write something like Tornado Cache. I think, and the libraries and frameworks and stuff are all getting a lot easier. So big year for ZK developers. The privacy debate, I don't know how much this will affect 2023, but as I mentioned, there's some ZK rollups that are public. There are some ZK things that are actually private. Tornado Cache kind of sparked some debate last year. I think as you put this technology into the hands of more people, there will be more of debates around what's the best way, like for sort of blockchain to operate from a privacy perspective. And I don't know. The governments are going to come in and who knows what's going to happen. Whatever. Few people will know the difference between scaling solutions, marketing wins. That is my sort of not optimistic take for this. Is that even though actually there have been a bunch of people who have learned ZK, I still think that like even I have trouble telling the difference between like some of the scaling solutions and the different ZK VMs, and I can get some of the higher level trade-offs. Like Vitalik has a nice blog on the differences between them and how compatible they are. But there are a lot of choices with these things. Like, are you using Plonk or Hyperplonk or TurboPlonk? And like, it's a lot to keep up with. Most people won't keep up with it. Marketing is going to win more than some of the technical differences. And I do, like, business-wise, you can sort of fast follow and mimic what other people are doing, like reuse the same papers. So I think marketing is pretty important for ZK. Now, I guess one other, maybe this fits in with predictions, but it's important to note that optimistic rollups could convert to being ZK rollups later once the ZK technology is kind of more fleshed out. And so the play for optimistic rollups might be like garner market share now because it's very easy relatively to build a optimistic rollup. And then once you have market share, you just convert over to the ZK model later. That's another thing to just kind of watch out for. Q&A, how to write zero-knowledge proofs in Rust instead of CIRCOM. Use ArcWorks. So ArcWorks is at least co-maintained by Pratyush Mishra, and he is the best ZK teacher, in my opinion. All right, so there's like the professors I mentioned earlier. Everyone knows the professors. Very few people know this guy, but he's also, I think, the lead cryptographer, just one of the cryptographers at Alio, which has their own sort of ZK blockchain. I think they're going for layer 1 though. And yeah, Pratyush is such a good explainer of some of these concepts. He, like, way more than me, knows all the technical details. I mean, he wrote ArcWorks, which is crazy. And so, yeah, if you're asking for like the secret alpha, who do I look up to? That is Pratyush. I'm gonna include a list later of ZK people you should follow in the space if you're interested. I think that'll be fun. All right, what's the difference between a commitment scheme and a proof system? Are they the same? Can they be used? Examples of category where they're different. So commitment schemes have been around in cryptography a lot longer. What a commitment scheme is, do I have a slide on this? Not really. Okay. On a commitment scheme, you are committing to some value that will be revealed later. So the most common example of a commitment scheme is sort of like a coin flip. So you can do a ZK coin flip or just a cryptographic coin flip protocol, and you will want to have, like, if we're playing right now, me and you guys over Discord, you can't see the coin, so you don't know if I'm flipping it fairly. So if I ask you guys to call heads or tails, I can just lie to you and say that it was the other one, and you'll lose every time. So it's not a very fun protocol. So the solution, but also if I tell you the flip first and then ask you to guess, like, you're just gonna say the right answer every time, you win every time. So that doesn't work either. So what we do is we use a commitment scheme. I will flip a coin, not tell you, but I will send a commitment of it, which is basically, you can think of like putting the answer in an envelope and giving you the envelope. And you can't open the envelope without me giving you a second piece of information. All right, so we can say I put the answer in a locked box and give you the locked box. You make your guess, and then once you've made your guess, I will reveal what is inside the box. I will reveal the commitment, and so that's what a commitment scheme. That is one piece of a proof system. That's kind of where the zero knowledge portion comes in, is that in a proof system, you commit to a polynomial. And importantly, I want to verify these things so fast, I don't even want to see, like, I don't even have time to read the entire polynomial. The polynomials generated are actually kind of big. I mean, they're linear, and I want to get actually sublinear verification a lot of times. And so if I don't have time to read the whole polynomial, I need to be pretty convinced that you actually have a polynomial. And so a lot of times you will commit to the polynomial, and then the verifier will sort of make the prover reveal parts of that. And so that's how commitment scheme is one part of the proof system. And all right, what's most common schemes and expect to see popular? So there's a lot of differences in between all the different ZK systems. Dan Benet said this, so I'm repeating what he said, but there's not one zero knowledge proof system or method that is like optimal for every use case. There are a lot of different trade-offs. If you look here at like the prover complexity, verifier complexity, the communication complexity, those top three are the most sort of like important trade-offs. And a lot of times, especially for the verifier, that O of 1 verification for snarks is amazing, insanely fast to verify a snark. And so in general, you can see Starks are somewhat worse in pretty much every category than a Snark. So until you get down to the bottom, and there's no trusted setup required for Starks. They're also post-quantum secure, and because they just depend on collision-resistant hashes. And so if you're worried about post-quantumness and no trusted setup, use Starks. Pretty much the only people I see using Starks are Starkware. Everyone else is much more concerned about the runtime complexity and size of these things. So pretty much everyone else uses snarks or sometimes bulletproofs. Cool. So anyways, lots of trade-offs. Don't think any one of them is optimal. I think near-term snarks are better than starks, but even within snarks, there's so many different options and trade-offs and things. And if you want to read about KZG, then Scroll has a very nice blog post on it. ZK programming, I just want to cover a few options. So there's Circom's kind of the default if you're using Solidity. I like Mina's Snarky.js a lot. If you don't have a preference on sort of programming language, you just want to try this out. It's pretty much like JavaScript, and so that's probably the simplest one to ramp up on. Like you can write Mina smart contracts very quickly. Starkware Cairo, I see a lot of people who like Cairo. I haven't gotten the chance to use it very much yet. Aztec Noir is interesting because Aztec is actually like a ZK rollup, like a ZK rollup that uses privacy. So that could be a fun one too if you want to add the privacy component in. I also want to mention RISC-0 right now. They are a company that has built essentially zero-knowledge processor. So everyone else is converting sort of at the programming language level and then doing ZK on that. RISC-0 lets you use whatever programming language you want, and then they built a ZK compiler, so you get or ZK processor pretty much. So you can run regular Rust code, regular C++ code, nothing special about it at all. And just when their processors run, the processors generate ZK proofs along the way. So RISC-0 is interesting because you can use any programming languages that compile to LLVM. So like C or Rust or something. What's next? From an auditor standpoint, what areas of ZK should we be concerned with? Watch or read JP Amundsen's talk. I was all prepared for today to come in and give some, good security advice, but then I realized pretty much anything I was going to say, JP has already said more eloquently. So also, JP Amundsen used to work at Kodolsky Security, so shout out to JP. He's also the author of Serious Cryptography. So if you're looking for a cryptography textbook that is practical and like good for like an auditor, I find a lot of cryptography textbooks are like for math people or for researchers, and there aren't too many like hands-on cryptography books. JP Amundsen's one of the best. And yeah, just fun, I don't know, memory for me is I was looking at, because this was linked actually in the Spearbit Discord a few days ago, and the I went to the YouTube video of JP Amundsen's talk, and I saw, yeah, David Wong commented on it, and I watched the video back then when it came out, and that was when I first figured out that David Wong had a YouTube channel. David Wong is one of the cryptographers at Mina, and he has a great YouTube series on Plonk. So if you really want to get into the details of Plonk, you can go check out David Wong's stuff. I got to meet David Wong. I took a picture with him. I decided not to include the picture in this video just because, like, privacy. I don't know if David wants his face everywhere, but I love David. So, I don't know. That was fun. All right. Totally random slide, but I wanted to throw this in somewhere. ZK security two-factor authorization. So, as we know, so there's some dangers with ZK and security, and because of that, almost none of the whole ZK thing might be broken, potentially. I mean, that's happened to Zcash, and Zcash has some of the top ZK people in the world. So what Justin Jake proposed, like pretty recently, like last month, Justin Jake's an Ethereum researcher who is also worth following, is using SGX secure enclaves to sort of hedge against ZK snark rollup vulnerabilities. And so if you want to have a state transition like on chain, you would need both the snark and an SGX proof. This way, if some malicious hacker finds some flaw in a snark, then maybe they wouldn't also be able to do the 2FA and everything would still be safe. So interesting idea. It hasn't been like adopted anywhere yet, but worth calling out and thinking about. So there are lots of these discussions on like how to do ZK safely are like still ongoing. You can participate like right now and go respond to Justin Drake if you want. What are some of the common pitfalls errors projects make in relation to ZK? I refer you again to JP Amundsen for the question. Question 4, what are some of the recommended materials, exercises you found most helpful? So I recommended the sort of like first exercises if you want to try something out yourself earlier, but study resources, Matter Labs, their GitHub has just a long list of like pretty much everything else. Like it's a mega resource of all the other resources. So probably just start there. I like Scroll's blog a lot. zklearning.org is the link to the ZK MOOC by those 5 professors. And zeroKnowledge.fm is probably in general the best ZK resources out there. That's what Anna Rose is running with the ZK podcast, and they have some intro lectures. I think the ZK podcast is on like episode 200 or something. Every one of them is an hour long. So if there is a ZK person or protocol or something that you like, they've probably been on the ZK podcast at some point. So you can go find that episode probably, and that's going to be a great explanation because you can hear from the real people who did it. People to follow, as I mentioned, Pratyush Mishra, Alio and Arcworks. I like both Togrel and I don't know Pseudotheos' name. Just follow their Twitter account. So also that person has a blog explaining some more ZK things. Both of those are great to follow. Dyer Hopwood is one of the top cryptographers at Zcash. I don't actually know if it's Zcash or like the Electric Coin Company or where, roughly in the Zcash ecosystem. And then Justin Drake from Ethereum, and obviously all of the professors as well. But sometimes it's nice to follow the practitioners. So cool. I might have sped through that quickly or slowly. I don't know. Q&A, more questions. This is opening up to anyone who has questions about anything. More technical question, but I'm a little confused in how a Plonkish constraint can access a variable in a different row column. Wonder if you can explain more about that system. that's probably a good, yeah, that's hard to explain out loud without like drawing some stuff. And even if I wanted to explain it, I would go back and watch David Wong's explanations again. So probably watch David Wong's. I should have listed him here on people to follow, but go find, yeah, David Wong's YouTube channel, and he has a nice explanation on Plonk. Yeah, I do want to call out one more time. Yeah, watch JP Amison's talk for all of the security people here. He walks through a lot of the different areas, the different vulnerabilities that you'll need to think about. The most egregious of which are that false proofs get accepted, but you will see like concrete examples of everything. It's a brilliant talk. So I was like, I can't make anything better than that. I'll just link it. Any other questions? I see some people typing. Anticipation. No, I guess I can click to the end, and yeah, feel free to message me on Twitter or Telegram anytime. I keep both of those open, I think, or at least I try to. So you should always, yeah, anyone can message me anytime about anything. I try to respond to every message that I get. Sometimes with ECC, you hear about the possibility of backdoors being introduced. Is there any similarity for this for the setup phase you mentioned? That's a good question. Let me go back and look at backdoors for the setup. We gotta go back to the first slide. So the reason there's a setup in the first place is because a lot of times you need some sort of starting point for these protocols. It can literally be like a random number, but you enter the cryptography problem of like, how do you know it's random? That's why in a lot of these trusted setups, you have a lot of people participate, and the protocol is set so that as long as one person in the setup is good, then the whole thing should work out nicely. That's the theory. The problem is Zcash still had a big vulnerability in the setup, even with a bunch of people participating. And so they had to do like a huge network upgrade to Zcash last minute. And fun security thing to think about actually is the fact that on the privacy ZK like applications, since it's private, no one actually knows if some of this stuff is hacked because no one knows much of anything about what's happening. You just verify the proofs, and if the proof verifies, you move on. And so you can't count like if anything was actually hacked by that, or if they really did catch it before anything bad happened. It's completely unknown, which is kind of fun, kind of terrifying. Which ZK projects interest me the most? So again, I come at it from the technical side, and my general thesis is just if interesting people are working there, it's probably going to end up being a good project. So that's kind of how I differentiate between the different ZK projects. I like to know if there's good people working there. Polygon's ZK team is completely stacked. So whatever you think about the rest of Polygon, they hired not just one of the best ZK teams in the world, but they hired like 3 of the best ZK teams in the world, just to have 3 different ZK teams all working independently. Or I mean, they kind of collaborate, but so Polygon stacked. I like the people at Scroll. I like Mina a lot. Mina has some very talented people as well, and Starkware is interesting too. I like the people at Starkware, but it's a big bet to bet on Starks over Snarks. Um, I think I like most of the projects. I'm interested in like ZK Bridges. There aren't really any ZK projects I don't like. So pretty much everyone I've met so far is trying to do something cool. It's still so early that like anyone trying to build a ZK thing is probably very intelligent. Like there hasn't been much like uh I don't know, so like scammy ZK projects don't really exist too much because anyone like smart enough to build a ZK project is generally like well respected and nice. Do you have thoughts on the intersection of FHE, fully homomorphic encryption, and ZK? Will be too difficult to be practical? Will there need to be a new proof system to accommodate it? I've heard a little about this. I haven't looked too much into the practicality of it. I know FHE is like quite expensive in the first place, and so it's already not used too much. Pairing it up with ZK leads to some like amazing privacy properties. So it would be cool. I'd like to see at least somebody try and do it. But I haven't seen it, and I don't think anyone's working on it too hard yet. I think it's not that it's impossible to do right now, but there are lots of improvements to be made with ZK that like you can make bigger steps in ZK just with ZK at the moment. Once ZK I think is more solidified, then people will start adding a FHE on top and seeing what else. I don't know if you need a new proof system or if you could just do it straight away. Does the setup depend on the circuit used? Like I said, it depends on the whole program you're using. And so some ZK proof systems require you to make a new a new setup every single time, which is pretty inconvenient. And some of them don't. Those are much better. I like, at least like on Zcash, they do one setup for everyone, and then it's not too bad to do. If you have to do a setup for every circuit, that's really inconvenient. I think most of those will be phased out. If someone forked Tornado Cash, could they just reuse the string from their ceremony, or are there security issues with reusing it? So yeah, you can use a string from anyone's ceremony, and like you're just as safe as that ceremony. So if you don't want to roll your whole ceremony yourself and you're comfortable with using someone else's ceremony, you can just reuse that too. Because like I said, a lot of the point of ceremony is just to generate some randomness. So if you're confident somebody did a ceremony well, there's some good randomness there, go ahead and use that again. Otherwise, do your own setup. How are complexity and information theory implicated? At what level do you need to worry about these? I mean, complexity theory, you saw that there's a lot of complexity theory between the different ZK protocols and the trade-offs. Let me go find that slide. The different options here. So complexity theory definitely plays a big role, and because even within snarks, like I talked about, like there's the circuits and the arithmetization, and you can take different choices at every single one of those steps, and when you combine a lot of those, it leads to different things. So that's big. Information theory, I love information theory. It's not too used here though. But thank you guys a lot, or I'll let someone else decide if we're wrapping up. But always message me on Twitter or Telegram if you need me, or just want to say hi or have a question, or you're stuck on something, I'll respond.